Hi, my name's Catherine Berlinger. I'm a faculty member at Conestoga College, and I'm currently working as a teaching and learning consultant for the Professional Development Department. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the context in which academic offenses occur so that you can help to prevent them in your classes. I've categorized the type of offenses you might see on the written work that's submitted to you into three categories: the good, the bad, and the ugly. In the case of those academic offenses or possible academic offenses that you might describe as good, this is where the student had no intent to subvert the educational process. They might have submitted work where the documentation or the citation or the summarizing or paraphrasing is poorly done, and they have not properly indicated where their voice ends and someone else's voice begins, but you're absolutely sure that the bulk of the work is original and that the student has clearly met the assignment outcomes. In this case, hopefully you would be able to penalize the student in the rubric for the task rather than filing an academic offense, although you would want to speak with them and give them a warning and take written note of that warning. In the case of the bad, this is the usual type of offense that I've filed in my teaching career. I'm absolutely certain in these cases that a student has deliberately committed an offense in using somebody else's work as their own, or in cutting and pasting from the internet. Perhaps I've used Turnitin and it's found quite significant proof of this. And it's usually just one student that I'm dealing with, so I can file in good conscience that academic offense report after checking with the registrar's office to see if it's a first or second or third offense. In the case of the ugly, these are the real stressors. I'm sure that what I'm reading is not the student's own work, but I have a lack of evidence, and so I'm not sure if it would stand up to appeal, or multiple individuals are involved, or perhaps I have guilt about my own direction for the task. In all of these cases, our main goal is to prevent them from happening in the first place. A lot of faculty feel that they're seeing more and more academic offenses occurring, especially in the written work that's submitted by students. And I have that feeling as well. I seem to have seen more cases in recent years than I did when I was teaching a decade or more ago. So what context might be causing more offenses to occur, or for us to see more blatant or obvious offenses? Well, one thing would be the new technology that's available to students. So if they've been working late in the evening and are doing assignment at the last minute, they have access to so many files and so much information on the internet, and the temptation to cut and paste is definitely there. We also have an internationalized community where students might be in our classes who have not had exposure to the Canadian educational system to the degree that they might need in order to understand what exactly is meant by an academic offense or by plagiarism. And we have an environment in which students are encouraged to collaborate on an ongoing basis in our labs and in parts of our class, yet we still need to measure them against the learning outcomes individually, and so there's a tension between what is collaboration and what is collusion that sometimes causes confusion. This is one of my four daughters here, and my four daughters belong to what's referred to as the open source culture, a group of young individuals who find it hard to believe that anyone really owns an operating system, or anyone really owns a piece of software or an item of music that they might want to listen to. And they feel that these things are all available to be not only used, but to be adapted as their own. So you might find a picture posted on the internet, and a few days later, hundreds and thousands of people have reposted it with variations and made it partly theirs and partly the original source. And so we have a generational issue in terms of collaboration, collusion, giving credit to the original source. And it's really interesting to look at the younger generation's use of resources and materials. When we think about this issue of drawing the line between collaborating or collusion, it's sometimes helpful to think about our own interactions with our own children, nephews, nieces, people that we may have known in the community, or our own parents when they were helping us prepare for schoolwork. I'd like to take a minute and please read this text messaging between my daughter and I. At the same time that I was preparing this presentation on academic offenses, she was preparing some work at Dalhousie University where she's in first year. Take a minute and read the exchange. Now, Tamir has clearly gotten some assistance with her homework in a form that I hope is collaboration more than collusion. But it's really interesting to think about the fact that many students don't have access to somebody that can help them to think about things and then transfer them into their own words. And I haven't got a doubt that Tamir will meet the learning outcomes for the course that she is doing this work for. But she clearly has an advantage that a other student who perhaps is an international student or first generation student would not have in the completion of their academic work. So we have our generational differences and generational expectations, with the younger generation being more open source. But we also have other sources of differences in our classroom. That's a picture of myself many years ago at the time that I was finishing high school. And I grew up in Canada, and I understood the expectations of the environment. And although there were times when my behavior in school was not absolutely angelic, I never got caught for plagiarism, and I always understood what was acceptable, what was almost acceptable, and what was going to get me into trouble. But there's a picture there also of some students I've had in the last few years who came from China or Japan or the Middle East. And those students, we have to understand, have had a very limited exposure to the expectations of a Canadian educational system. And because of their educational background, national background, ethnic upbringing, may not have the same understanding of how to use sources and how to attribute information to sources. So who gets caught? I certainly hope it's not my daughter, who has generally very strong writing skills and a lot of academic experience and can submit work that is her own. And even though she has help sometimes, she understands that she needs to make sure that she credits the work of others. But we do have potentially disadvantaged plagiarizers who we may easily catch when we're reading their written work. These would include L2 students, second language students, who may not be confident as they move from their own voice or their own writing into someone else's. And certainly if they have cut and paste, you can see an abrupt change there, and you'll have a sinking feeling that this student has now plagiarized. They may also have less confidence in their own writing and be tempted to use the words of others, or simply not have gotten exactly what is meant by plagiarizing and how serious it is to use the words of someone else without credit. We also have Generation 1.5 immigrant students who came to Canada during their high school years and to all intents and purposes now seem to be near native speakers of English. But they have fewer years of academic study in Canada, and they may have gaps in their writing abilities or their abilities to do academic work. Their skills are still being built. And first generation students, those students are their first in their families to come to post-secondary, don't have anybody at home to access like my daughter does, and so may have work that they don't have someone edit or review beforehand and hand in. And socioeconomically challenged students, many of our students nowadays are working too many hours every week, and so may find themselves in a crunch at the last minute preparing an assignment and fall into the temptation of cutting or pasting or using work that is not their own. So there are reasons that some students appear to get caught more often. I think many more students could be caught but are skillful. So in trying to understand who plagiarizes and why some people are caught more readily than others, there's a number of continuums that are at play. One is the collaboration-collusion continuum, where in post-secondary education for a long time now, we've been wanting students to work together. So we have them work together in the lab, we have them work together on projects, we have group work in our classroom situations. And we're saying, please collaborate, because we know this can give them ownership of the concepts. However, we want to measure them independently against our course outcomes, and we don't always draw the lines when we assign tasks clearly between when collaboration is permitted and when that becomes collusion in our own minds. We have the individualistic collectivist continuum as well. Younger generation students from other cultures may well belong to a more collectivist society where there's a huge peer pressure and expectation that they'll help each other even if it means jeopardizing their own career, because aiding and abetting is just as dangerous as committing an offense directly in terms of having an academic offense filed. In my more individualistic generation, I probably wouldn't take the risks that some students are taking today. Relationship roles, students, especially from other cultures, can't believe that when the Canadian teacher seemingly appears to be so friendly and so warm, they would actually file one of those papers rather than permitting the student to rewrite it. Education is personal development. That's how I grew up. The education was really for me. But many students coming from other cultures, it's a huge family asset, and their families, their mom and dad and other relatives have invested in their coming to Canada for an education, and rather than failing them, there may be a temptation to sometimes commit an academic offense if it's the only way that they see they might pass a particular course. And other continuums below that you could think about, just pop down to the last one. Outcomes-based education. We're working in outcome-based education, yet students come to us from other cultures and younger generation and say, but I worked hard, I tried hard, I did all my work. Why can't I pass? And we have to help students understand more that we are measuring them against the outcomes and not against whether they attended or how hard they worked, and that they have to have done what was asked in terms of academic honesty in the production of written work. So think through why some of the cases of plagiarism occur or academic offenses, and think more about how, by understanding these, we can prevent them in the classroom. So why do international newcomer students get caught more often? I think that they may be much less sophisticated in how they do it. Younger generation Canadians have had some practice in the expectations of teachers through high school or through previous post-secondary work. They also may do it for different reasons. We touched briefly on the idea that there are differences in beliefs about the ownership of intellectual property, huge monetary stakes for international students. They may not understand that there will be no mercy on the penalty, and they may have anxiety about their writing skills in English. So the more we can do to make it clear how the assignment needs to be done, giving lots of lead time, encouraging students to use the writing center, etc., the more we can help to avoid these cases. So with students in general, they may have an ignorance about what really constitutes plagiarism and what's going to be allowed. I've had many high school students tell me that in high school they used a different form of citation. They didn't use citation at all. In fact, they handed in with sometimes just a page of references and no in-text citations, even though I've asked for them, and expressed surprise that this is not possible. So what exactly is plagiarism needs to be gone over. Many students believe that they won't get caught, even though you tell them you might be using Turnitin or this method or that method. So the more you tell them about how you will check for academic offenses is useful. They may fear that their own work won't meet a pass standard and that they'll fail and lose tons of time and money, so they're willing to take that risk. And again, that belief that the teacher will be merciful and punishment will not be severe is something I've heard from many students, both domestic students and international students. So we've looked a little bit at what might cause some students to commit an academic offense, but could there be some things that we're doing as faculty? I do believe that sometimes we push students to perform too early or too much volume. A 20-page assignment when a 5-page assignment will be fine, or we put them in group work situations where the volume of work and the number of people involved can cause stress. We sometimes repeat the use of tasks and tests too frequently and then in some way tempt students to use previous resources. We poorly define the group work sometimes and forget to tell students that they will be responsible for everybody's work when it's handed in, so that when plagiarism is caught in one section, they will be to blame as well. We have such different expectations sometimes in the lab work or the group work that students do in class, and then on mark tests we have to be really clear when they can collaborate and when not. And I think we need to have more and more rubrics that reward proper documentation and good selection of resources, so students see it as an asset to start to have skills in that area. So we've talked a little bit about some causes of plagiarism and some ways of looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly. If you could please review the list of suggestions I have for what we can do in our courses and at the college to further prevent plagiarism, and come up with 5 other ideas of what you could do in your class particularly, that would be wonderful.